In 1844, Atlanta, there was a night when a single creak of a door could crack a family open like lightning splits a tree. If you want more real-life feels like a movie stories like this, follow the channel and comment Oak. Right now, I'll drop the next part with an ending that will leave you cold. The air that summer wasn't only thick with humidity. It was thick with rules, rules made of pride and law and fear rules that decided who counted as human and who counted as property. And in the middle of those rules sat Oak Haven, an estate so polished it looked like it had been scrubbed by angels, white columns, clipped hedges, jasmine drifting in the dark, and soil so rich it could grow anything, especially silence. Oak Haven belonged to Mrs. Elelena Vance. Elelena was 50, razor-minded, and built her life the way other people build fortresses. In the South, men could buy power with land and money. Women, especially women like her, bought power with reputation. One stain, one whisper, one rumor turned loose at a tea table, and everything you were could be taken from you. Elelena understood that better than most. She didn't just protect the Vance name. She worshipped it. Her one weakness, the one thing that made her sleep with a shallow breath, was her only child, Clara. Clara was 19 and impossibly radiant, the kind of beauty that made people lower their voices when she entered a room. She had dark honey hair, bright eyes, and a restlessness that didn't fit into the polite cages Oak Haven was built to hold. She was supposed to marry a suitable man, secure alliances, become a proper lady with a proper smile, and someday replace her mother as the unshakable pillar of Atlanta society. But Clara wasn't made for pillars. She was made for wind. It started small, late to supper, distracted at church, bored during the endless talk of crops and dowries. At 17, she began slipping away after sunset, drifting toward the tree line as if something beyond it was calling her by name. When her mother scolded her fan, tapping against wrist like a metronome of control, Clara would answer softly, stubbornly, "Let them talk, Mama." Elelena heard those words the way a soldier hears a distant drum. Let them talk meant danger. Let them talk meant ruin. To understand why, you have to understand Oak Haven's geography. The main house sat like a marble crown. A quarter-mile past the stables, behind thick oaks and weeping willows, stood the quarters, a scatter of rough cabins where the enslaved people lived. Between the house and the quarters was more than distance. It was a line enforced by law, by custom, by violence. A white young lady did not cross it, not ever, not unless she wanted the world to take a long, delighted look at her fall. And then things began disappearing. At first, it was insignificant, an embroidered handkerchief with the Vance crest. Later, a silver locket Clara rarely wore. Elelena blamed carelessness until she noticed the smell. One evening, she stepped into Clara's bedroom, doing what she called motherly concern, but what was in truth surveillance. Heavy velvet curtains held onto a faint, smoky odor, wood smoke, cooking greens, something earthy and metallic. It wasn't lavender. It wasn't expensive soap. It was the quarters. Elelena stood perfectly still, her heart striking hard in her chest. "Clara," she said with a dangerous smoothness, "have you been near the stables this evening?" Clara's brush slowed in the mirror. "No, Mama. I was in the library. The air is unfamiliar," Elelena said, adjusting a curtain she didn't need to touch. "Perhaps the wind has changed direction?" Clara answered too quickly. "The smoke drifts sometimes." Elelena let it go, but suspicion does not need proof to grow. It only needs possibility. In the weeks that followed, she watched her daughter the way a hawk watches a field. She counted Clara's naps. She measured the silences between piano notes. She noted how her daughter's gaze kept flicking toward the woods like a compass needle pulled by some hidden magnet, and she questioned the servants. Mabel, a small housemaid who shook when spoken to, tried to offer harmless routines. "Miss Clara reads. Miss Clara walks the garden until Elenena's stare pinned her to the floorboards. "Speak," Elena snapped. "Do not omit a single detail." Mabel's eyes dropped. "Ma'am, sometimes Miss Clara tells me to leave her supper on the small table by the kitchen door. Says she'll fetch it herself later, after everyone's gone to bed." That was the moment Elena felt the shape of the secret. A lady with cooks and footmen doesn't carry her own food into the night unless she's feeding someone she does not want seen. Elena didn't confront Clara. Confrontation would only drive the truth deeper underground. She wanted proof. Proof that could not be denied. Proof that could be crushed. 3 nights later, the moon was gone and the darkness lay over Oakhaven like a hand pressed to a mouth. Elena feigned a headache, sent her maid away, locked her door, and waited until the hall clock struck 2. She dressed in a simple dark gown, slipped into soft slippers, and moved through her own house with the quiet competence of someone who has spent a lifetime controlling rooms. The staircase groaned once. She froze, then continued. She reached Clara's door ajar. Inside, the bed was empty. The sheets were cool, thrown back in haste. A cold dread settled in Elena's stomach. She checked the library, the parlor, the conservatory. Emptiness, silence. At the back door, the latch was set, but the bolt wasn't fully drawn. Someone had left quickly. Elena stepped into the heat, jasmine thick in the air. Beneath it was that same smoky scent. And on the breeze came something else, muffled laughter, faint but unmistakable, rising from the direction of the quarters. Fury sharpened her fear into a single blade. She lifted her skirts and moved fast across the wet lawn, keeping to shadows, mindful of patrols and late-moving hands. The path through the oaks was rough, overgrown, and with every step the sounds grew clearer, low voices, a scrape of wood against wood, the hush of a gathering. At the edge of the quarters, most cabins were dark, but a derelict storage shed near the woods, used sometimes for curing tobacco, held a thin flicker of lamplight leaking through a crack. Elena pressed herself to the wall, heart hammering. She leaned into the crack and looked inside, expecting one kind of disgrace and finding another. Clara sat on an overturned barrel hair, tied back, dressed not in silks, but in a plain cotton dress. Around her stood 5 enslaved men. Moses, Cato, Sam, Elias, and young Thomas faces turned toward her with intense focus. Their posture wasn't bowed in servitude. It was the posture of people leaning toward something precious. In Clara's hands was a crude slate and a piece of chalk. She was teaching them letters. Elena's mind went cold. This wasn't flirtation. This wasn't a secret romance or a foolish rebellion of youth. This was a crime. The law forbade it. Society feared it. Literacy meant ideas. Ideas meant discontent. Discontent meant revolt. To teach enslaved men to read was to challenge the entire foundation Oakhaven stood on. And then Moses laughed, clear, bright, human. Clara smiled back, a smile Elena hadn't seen in years. It wasn't the polite smile a daughter gives a caller. It was a smile of belonging. That smile given to people the world insisted were property felt to Elena like a knife. She stepped back to retreat and plan and destroy the secret properly, but her heel caught a root. Her elbow struck the shed wall. The sound cracked the night. Inside, everything froze. Moses rose slowly, eyes wide. "Someone's out there," he whispered. Clara turned toward the sound face draining of color. She didn't need to see. She knew the weight of her mother's presence, the way a ship knows the pull of a storm. Elena straightened, summoning every ounce of her authority. She slammed her hand against the flimsy door 3 hard knocks. "Open this door immediately!" Silence. Then her voice dropped into something lethal. "If you do not open it, I will have the overseer burn this structure with everyone inside." Terror moved inside the shed hands, scrambling slate, hidden chalk wiped away. But Clara Ara knew resistance would only worsen what was coming. She opened the door herself. Lamplight spilled out, painting Elelenena's face in harsh angles. She didn't look at the men first. She looked at her daughter. "You," she hissed, and the word carried judgment like a weight. "You have ruined us all." The 5 men stood still, eyes lowered. Clara Ara held her head up, not defiant, just stunned by how quickly mercy could turn into catastrophe. "Fetch Silas," Elelenena ordered, voice crisp as a whip. "Bring chains, and bring every soul from the quarters to the main yard. They will witness what happens to those who forget their place." When Elelenena Vance gave an order, the ground itself seemed to obey. Silas arrived with iron keys clanking like a warning bell. The men offered no resistance when shackles snapped around their wrists. They knew the rules. They knew what the rules did to bodies and families. As Moses was pulled forward, his eyes met Clara Ara's. No blame, only sorrow, as if he was apologizing for the danger his hope had brought her. Elelenena turned to her daughter. "You will walk with them," to where Clara Ara whispered. "To the main yard," Elelenena replied, stepping past her. "Where the world can see the depth of your shame." Then came the second command, colder than the first. "Silas, wake them all. Every man, woman, and child. If anyone resists, you know what to do. I want them in the yard within 15 minutes. The lesson starts tonight." The quarters erupted in muted panic doors, opening mothers, lifting children, old men pulling on shoes with trembling hands. No one asked why. A midnight gathering meant only one thing, a spectacle. Torches were lit around the yard until Oakhaven's lawn looked like a stage built for judgment. 90 enslaved people were forced into a tight semicircle facing the veranda. Chains rattled in the center. The air smelled of smoke, sweat, and fear. Elelenena stood on the veranda steps, dark gown making her look like a statue carved from night. When she spoke, her voice carried like a sermon. "Tonight," she said, "a sickness has been found in the heart of Oakhaven. A sickness of disobedience, of arrogance, of treason." She named the 5 men and called their act an attempt to steal tools of rebellion. Then slowly, deliberately, she shifted her gaze to Clara Ara. "The greater crime," she said, "belongs to the one who guided them." Clara Ara lifted her chin, eyes bright with pain and something deeper. "They were only learning," she said, voice trembling but clear. "It was harmless. They deserve letters just like we do." "Harmless," Elelenena repeated, and the word snapped. "You speak of treason against God and law and call it harmless." What followed was a punishment designed not merely to hurt, but to restore the world as Elelenena understood it by making an example so unforgettable no one would dare imagine crossing that line again. She sentenced the 5 men to public correction and immediate sale far away into deeper territory where distance would erase them. She sentenced Clara Ara as well, not because it was ordinary, not because society would approve, but because she believed only a public sacrifice could cleanse the stain on the Vance name. The yard held its breath as Clara Ara was stripped of the illusion that protected her fine fabrics, removed, hands bound. The pain was real, but the humiliation was the true weapon, a lesson carved into the eyes of everyone watching. Clara Ara tried to stay silent, tried to refuse them the sound of her breaking until her body betrayed her, and a sob escaped despite her will. On the veranda, Elelenena did not flinch. Not once. She watched the punishment like a surgeon watching a necessary cut. Mercy would have been weakness. Weakness would have been gossip. Gossip would have been ruin. When it ended, Clara Ara collapsed, shaking, too exhausted to hold herself up. Elelenena stepped down, stood over her without touching her, and spoke as if issuing a decree. "Lift her. Make her stand. Let them look." And to the crowd, "This is Clara Vance. My blood. And yet she stands here shamed because she dared to breach the wall between order and chaos." Then, with a final coldness, She ordered the 5 men locked away and sold at sunrise. "They are never to return," she said, sealing their fate as if sealing an envelope. By morning, Oak Haven looked perfect again, blood scrubbed away, torches extinguished. The yard returned to manicured innocence. Elelonina wrote a story for society to swallow. Clara Ara had a severe nervous fever brought on by heat. She would be confined for weeks. Visitors would be turned away with sympathetic sighs. Atlanta sent flowers. Elelonina received condolences. The lie fit neatly into the world's expectations. A delicate young lady ill, a devoted mother managing her with grace. But upstairs, Clara Ara lay face down on silk sheets, healing in a prison disguised as a bedroom. Mabel tended her in silence, applying salves and pressing cloths, eyes haunted by what she had seen. "Why did you do it?" Mabel whispered one night, unable to keep the question behind her teeth. Clara Ara's voice came muffled into the pillow. "Because they deserve to be more than things." Mabel's hands trembled. "That talk is what brings the whip." Clara Ara exhaled a weak, bitter laugh. "My mother doesn't keep the rules, Mabel. She is the rule." Elelonina, meanwhile, managed fallout with the efficiency of someone extinguishing a fire before smoke can rise. She arranged the sale. She ensured distance. She ensured silence. She stepped into her public role like slipping on gloves. When she finally visited Clarara's room, she brought no comfort, only information and control. "The men are gone," she said. "You will never see them again." A single tear slid from the corner of Clara Ara's eye, not for herself, but for the weight her hope had placed on others. "And you," Elelonina continued, "will remain here. You are ill. You will not receive visitors. No man of standing in Atlanta will take a woman linked to this kind of scandal. I will find a husband elsewhere. Charleston, New Orleans, somewhere the whispers won't catch you." Clara Ara turned her head slowly. "You think you won. I secured our reputation," Elelonina said, calm as stone. "That is all that matters." "You secured a prison," Clara Ara whispered. "For me. And for yourself." Elelonina's composure cracked only enough to show steel beneath. "Obedience is your only path now." Clara Ara stared at the ceiling and let hatred settle into her like a second spine. "I will never forgive you." Elelonina nodded. "Forgiveness is not required. Obedience is." From that day forward, Clara Ara learned a new talent: how to appear broken without surrendering. She became quiet. She became careful. She smiled when demanded. She nodded at commands. She let her mother believe the lash had succeeded. 6 weeks later, she returned to society at the Calhoun Autumn Ball, dressed in perfection, pearls at her throat hair, arranged exactly, posture demure. Elelonina hovered near her like a watchtower, pleased by her daughter's controlled silence. But Clara Ara's eyes weren't on eligible gentlemen. They were on exits, on servants' paths, on conversations about travel and trade. In the crush of silk and laughter, she heard 2 brokers discussing a fast clipper ship leaving Savannah for New York, cargo heavy, a few cabins available for those who paid quietly. The ship's name was Freedom. The word hit her like a bell. That night, Clara Ara returned to Oak Haven with a plan beating in her chest. She had 72 hours, maybe less, before her mother locked her into a marriage that would turn her into a living tomb. She needed money, document secrecy, and someone who could move between Oak Haven and Atlanta without suspicion. She thought of Jonas, the head stable master. Enslaved in his late 40s, quiet, precise, with the kind of intelligence that learned to survive by hiding its shine. Jonas had always offered Clara Ara small kindnesses that felt like humanity slipping through a crack in the wall. The next afternoon, Clara Ara feigned a relapse: weakness, dizziness, solitude. Elelonina, relieved to see her daughter quiet again, allowed it. When the house settled, Clara Ara wrapped herself in a shawl and slipped to the stables. Jonas looked up from grooming a mare, eyes alert. "Miss Clara," he said flatly, "you shouldn't be here." "I know," she whispered. "I need your help." Jonas didn't ask why. The yard had answered that question weeks ago. "Help with what I need to leave Oak Haven." Clara said the words tasting like blood. "Tonight, if possible. If not within 2 days. There's a ship from Savannah. It goes to New York." Jonas studied her face the way a man studies weather. "That road is dangerous," he said. "Especially for a woman alone. I will not survive staying." Clara Ara answered, "My mother is arranging a marriage. A prison with lace curtains. I won't be broken twice." Jonas's gaze flicked to the main house white columns bright in the sun like bone. He remembered the torches, the crowd, the lesson. He remembered the way power had turned on its own blood to keep itself intact. "Money?" Jonas asked. "I have jewelry," Clara Ara said. "Heirlooms. Worth enough for passage, but I can't sell them here. It would draw attention." Jonas nodded once, slow and deliberate. "I know a man in Atlanta," he said. "A free man of color. He deals in quiet exchanges. He can move the jewels and arrange passage, but it's risk. He'll take a cut." "I don't care," Clara Ara breathed. "I just need a way out." The plan formed in the stable's dim heat, like a prayer whispered over a knife. Clara Ara returned to the house, heart pounding. She knew where her mother hid the key. She knew where the iron safe sat. She moved with the careful precision of a person who has learned how surveillance works. She opened the safe and found velvet-lined proof of the Vance legacy pearls, a sapphire brooch pieces that could buy silence and distance. She swept them into a pouch and wrote a short note and offered to a captain payment for a cabin for secrecy, for a life erased. At dusk, she returned to Jonas, handed him the pouch and the note. Jonas hid them beneath the saddle blanket as if hiding nothing more than cloth. "Be careful," Clara Ara whispered. "If you're caught—" "I know the risk," Jonas interrupted gently. "You worry about your own feet." He rode out, telling anyone who asked that a horse needed special shoeing in the city. Clara Ara returned to her room, packed a small bag, and waited. Each tick of the clock tightened around her ribs. Near midnight, a soft scratching at the window signal. Clara Ara opened it. Jonas stood below, face grim in moonlight, holding a sealed packet. "It's done," he whispered. "Passage is secured. The ship leaves tomorrow night. You must leave Oak Haven now. A man will meet you outside Atlanta and guide you to the rail line. Inside the packet, a train ticket. Cash, a crude map. Enough to gamble her life on." Clara Ara's eyes stung. "Thank you," she whispered, and for the first time in weeks, tears arrived not from pain, but from something like relief. Jonas looked up at her with pity and a quiet, fierce hope. "Go," he said. "Find your freedom, and remember what you left behind." Clara Ara, dressed in dark traveling clothes, tucked the packet close, lifted her bag, and slipped into the hallway. She moved through Oak Haven like a shadow that had learned from its own punishment. She eased open the back door and stepped onto the veranda, the same place she had been displayed as a lesson. She paused. One heartbeat. One last look at the fortress of her mother's power. Then she ran across lawn, toward stables, toward road, toward the possibility of a life where she could breathe without permission. But Antebellum Vance was not asleep. Since the night of the torches, she slept like a weapon set on a table always ready. She heard the faint click of a latch, the soft complaint of a door. She rose, went straight to Clara Ara's room, unlocked it with a master key. Empty. Window slightly ajar. Antebellum's eyes went to the vanity safe. She didn't need to open it to know. She stood in the doorway, and something cold settled over her like armor. This was no longer disobedience. It was war. She rang for Silas and spoke with a voice that didn't shake. "Wake the riders." Saddle the fastest horses. My daughter has run away. Block the roads. If she reaches the rail line, we lose everything. Then softer and more lethal. Find Jonas. He helped her. If he resists, you know what to do. And with that, Oakhaven's queen became a hunter driven not only by anger but by a terrifying need to recapture the thing she believed belonged to her daughter, her property, her story. Because in 1844, Atlanta, the greatest crime wasn't stealing jewels, it was stealing yourself.